That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you. And we are just going to let that music play for a little bit because the Chicago Bears have won 3 in a row and 2 in incredible fashion here with the Raiders game and now this Commanders game on Monday Night Football. We are going to talk about it. We are going to talk about the positives. We're going to talk about the negatives. We're going to talk about Troy Aikman. I might even talk about the officials. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to talk about it with Matt Spiegel of The Score. He's going to be by here in just a little bit. I'm going to pick his brain on all this because every time Matt seems to come on this podcast, it seems to be some sort of disaster is looming for the Bears. But this time we get to come out after a win, after things are looking like they're headed in the right direction. I am excited. Bears fans should be excited. And we are just moving everything in the right direction. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. So let's dive in. Let's jump in with this Bears game last night. And you know what? We're not going to start with Ben Johnson. We're not going to start with Caleb Williams. We're going to start with Jake Moody. And all the jokes were flying around when he got elevated from the practice squad. And all the jokes were flying around after it found out that Cairo Santos was going to be inactive about Jake Moody, the inaccuracies. This is going to come down to a Jake Moody field goal. The Bears are doomed. Oh my God. You know, that meme of the video game kicker with the field goal aimed to like 50 yards to the left. Like all that was coming across the timeline for Jake Moody. And I get it. This guy was a 3rd round pick. A kicker was a 3rd round pick by the 49ers, a good organization. They said, we are just going to take an awesome kicker and we are never going to have to worry about kicking again. And he doesn't even get through his 2nd year with the Niners before he's released. Ryan Poles stashes him on the practice squad, which was like, all right, fine. No big deal one way or the other. But here Santos has the nagging injury, and here comes Jake Moody getting called up. Felt like Matt Prater, like for Buffalo a few weeks ago when he hit the game-winning field goal and had a big game for Buffalo. And here's, Jake Moody, who probably half the roster barely even knew at that point when he gets called up and is in the locker room dressed on Monday night before the game. And look, was Jake Moody perfect? Look, he did everything he needed to do. I know he missed a field goal. And when we look at that field goal, you could sit there and see, well, that's the Jake Moody that the 49ers released. I mean, that ball was so low, it barely was going to hit the offensive lineman in the backs. It was unbelievably a low kick, but they still, the offense was stalling. It couldn't get in the end zone much yesterday. So here comes Jake Moody drilling field goals. Yeah, he missed the one, but then with the game on the line, Moody drills the field goal to give the Bears a victory. Ben Johnson gives them a game ball after the game. Well-deserved for Jake Moody hitting all those field goals and hitting the one that matters. It's a great story, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, Moody needs to be the Bears kicker. I understand he's got a much bigger leg than Cairo Santos. Santos is a much more accurate kicker than Moody. If Santos is healthy for next week's game against New Orleans, Santos should be the kicker. No, I don't think the Bears should keep 2 kickers on their roster in case someone else wants to sign Jake Moody. If that's all Jake Moody ever does for the Chicago Bears, we tip our cap to you, Jake Moody. And look, if the Bears want to make a change and try and give Moody a shot, that's fine, because Cairo Santos isn't the long-term answer here either. So I'm ambivalent to this, whatever happens moving forward. But I'm not sitting here going to pound the table for Jake Moody because I understand where he's been. But because of where he's been, that makes that game all the sweeter for him. That was an awesome story. I'm all for being part of the Jake Moody fan club. No Moody blues here. Moody comes through, hits the game winner for the Bears. So Caleb Williams pumping him up after the game, giving him a big hug, screaming in his ear. Like that's what we're getting with Ben Johnson. That's an easy transition to start talking about the coach, about the camaraderie, about the culture that Ben Johnson is building in this locker room. Because these last 2 games, and I understand there was a bye in the middle, so it's 3 weeks. So these last 2 games, the Chicago Bears are finding ways to win football games. For a team that has found ways to lose football games, and I know a lot of it was the coach. It wasn't always the coach. Sometimes the players did too. But this is a team that found ways to lose games in the past. And it's part of the culture. It's part of a losing culture. And I understand years ago when fans were wanting the Bears to tank because the season unraveled and they wanted the number 1 pick. And thanks to the Houston Texans and Lovie Smith, they did get the number 1 pick. And because they got that number 1 pick, all this has fallen in place. Lovie Smith deserves so much credit for where the Bears are now. It's really funny that all this has come together like it did, that they got the number 1 pick, that Ryan Poles could trade to the Carolina Panthers. They have a disastrous season. They get another number 1 pick. This time they draft Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson comes here because of Caleb Williams. All the things that came together thanks to Lovie Smith winning that football game in week 18 and delivering the Bears the number 1 pick. Truly incredible stuff that has happened. But I go back to that season because a lot of beat writers, a lot of media, local media covering the team, wanted the Bears to try and win football games down the stretch because they wanted the Bears to start building a winning culture. And Bears fans were getting all over Dan Weeder and the others who were talking about that, going, no, they need to lose games. They need to tank. They need to have the number 1 pick. And I was one of those. I said, forget culture right now. Bears need the number 1 pick. They need that asset more than anything else. But to their credit, to Weeder and the other guys' credit, the Bears did need to build a winning culture. Now, the problem was they had a coach and potentially a GM, but most importantly, a coach who didn't know how to do that. Now they have a coach that does know how to do that, who saw Dan Campbell do it firsthand. And Dan Campbell took a wretched organization with a wretched culture. It took him 1.5 years to build it up because they were a disaster in year 1 and a disaster the first half of year 2. Then they started winning football games because of the culture that was built, that the players, despite losing games, were believing in Dan Campbell and believing in the teammates and the faces in the locker room and saying, we can win football games. We're going to win football games. And because they believed it, it happened. Because so often when teams are expecting the next bad thing to happen, it does. And then when it does happen, you just let it consume you, it overwhelms you, and it becomes your identity. Instead of a mistake with a winning team that has a mistake, brushes it off immediately and says, all right, we move forward. We made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes, but we are a good team. We are a winning team. We are not going to let that get to us. It's that culture that Ben Johnson's building that is so excited. And he's not sitting here thinking this is a 3-2 team. They're great. He understands that they have a long way to go. You heard him in the locker room after the game talking about, say it after the win. Guys, this is why I'm talking about. We need to clean up the penalties. We need to clean up some of the sloppy play. And when we do you see it now? Like he's asking the team, do you see it? Do you see how good we can be if we clean all that mess up? And he is right. And he is holding that locker room accountable, and they love it. Like, look, I'm going to sit here and look at the players that they are playing hard. DeAndre Swift, who I have been super critical of over the last year and a half, just drilling the holes. He's hitting them so hard. I mean, look, and Kyle Monangai is a fun little story as a 7th-round pick. If you watch that game and watch the speed that DeAndre Swift hits the hole at versus Kyle Monangai, it's a Ferrari in first gear versus a Ferrari in 4th gear. Like it is remarkably different, the speed Swift has. The issue with Swift is vision, and that he doesn't always necessarily see where the holes are going to develop and where he needs to run. But if the offensive line is going to open up holes like they did against Washington, DeAndre Swift is going to be really effective moving forward here for the Bears this season and potentially beyond, because he doesn't need, I can see the hole there. I don't need to have vision. He was gaping holes. This offensive line was opening up. Really happy to see this, really, because the Ben Johnson run scheme has looked choppy here the first quarter of the season. Hasn't looked exactly like it was supposed to, and we know how important that running game is for Ben Johnson and where he wants his offense to be. The Bears have to be an effective running team. They have to be for Ben Johnson's offense to work. And they haven't really been. Even the blocking has been decent when you looked at the metrics and the blocking numbers, but it didn't translate to paper too much the first 4 games, but it did yesterday. And DeAndre Swift was truly incredible with how he ran the football and the amount of yards he piled up and the big touchdowns and everything he did for the team. This was the DeAndre Swift game. This was the game where DeAndre Swift put the Bears offense on his back and says, I am carrying you to a victory. Absolutely not anything I would have expected from DeAndre Swift, but it was sweet to see because this offense is starting to you're starting to see this Ben Johnson offense. It's not there yet. It is not clicking like Ben Johnson wants to see it, but you're starting to see it. You're seeing the offensive line starting to really play as a unit. And Theo Benedict gets a lot of credit for me for how he played that game. And I understand he didn't have to block Max Crosby this week. I understand he didn't have to block, Myles Garrett. But the Commanders are a functional defense, and he did a very good job. Now, I usually like to rewatch the game, and I specifically like to watch the offensive line so I can bring that knowledge to the podcast. I haven't had a chance to do that because we were recording here Tuesday morning right after the Monday night game, so I did not get a chance to rewatch the offensive line play. But from what I watched when I just was watching, the game on the television broadcast on Monday night, Benedict looked very good. You're not going to see this guy overpower players, but he was not getting pushed into Caleb's lap from what I saw. He was staying in front of his guys, solid in the pass protection. He wasn't, from what I saw, was not getting a ton of help in pass blocking, was out there on an island a lot and was being effective. He was moving his guys, staying where he needed to, putting his body where it needed to be in terms of cutting off defenders from getting into running lanes. Everything he needed to do. He looked really sharp. I'm really impressed with him. And I don't think Theo Benedict can be a long-term left tackle. I think he's got too many issues that could, that's going to prevent him from becoming great, because he doesn't have the arm length. He doesn't have the traits. But what he could become, and look, and if he becomes a starter, hey, it's even a great story. He may be bumped in at guard eventually, and maybe that's where he can become a starter. But even if he's never a long-term answer at starter, if Theo Benedict is a guy who you can keep around to be your 6th offensive lineman, and he backs up 4 positions, that's immensely valuable, especially coming as a UDFA. He's going to be a restricted free agent after next season. The Bears are going to be able to keep him around at a pretty affordable price, assuming they want to do that. Theo Benedict, we can't talk about it enough when Braxton Jones, whether it's not a fit for this scheme, whether the injury, the ankle, things aren't coming together, whatever it is for Braxton Jones, things are not right for him with this offense this season. Karan Amagaji, we know, can't be the answer at left tackle. Ozzie Trapillo didn't work nearly as well at left tackle than he did at right tackle. And look, they may try and do something drastic and move Darnell Wright to left tackle next season, so Ozzie Trapillo could potentially start at right tackle. They might try and do something like that next season. But you can't do that to Darnell Wright in the middle of the season. It's too difficult of a transition. So the fact that they were desperate, let's be honest here. The Bears were desperate, and I think a lot of the clunkiness of the offense, a big part of it was not getting the consistent play out of left tackle that they needed, and they didn't have anyone to turn to. They had, 3 tackles and between Amagachi, Trapillo, and Jones, and none of them could get the job done. So here comes Theo Benedict, the Canadian. Unbelievable story. We got Jake Moody winning the game. We got Theo Benedict making clutch blocks. What is going on here? The culture. The culture is what's going on here, because Ben Johnson, he is not a nerd with a whiteboard who doesn't know how to be a leader of men. This guy is a leader of men. He has this locker room believing. And the running game is coming together. The passing game is coming together. And it doesn't look perfect. And let's talk about Caleb Williams here for a minute with the passing game, because I put out his projected stats last night, because right now, through 5 games, Caleb Williams is on pace to throw for over 4,000 yards, 31 touchdown passes, not combined touchdowns, 31 touchdown passes with only 7 interceptions. Easily the greatest season in Chicago Bears history. And easily that would be one of the top 10 seasons for a quarterback this year. Like that it's over 30 touchdowns and over 4,000 yards. That's going to be a top 10 season. But here's the thing. I think if any of us looked at Caleb Williams through the first 5 games, and I understand I was very panicked about Caleb Williams after game 1, probably over panicked, but either way, I stand by it. I stand by what I said. But when we look at Caleb Williams here, I don't think any of us are sitting here saying it's clicking, it's humming with Caleb Williams. We're seeing the deficiencies still. We're seeing the inaccuracies with the football, and that he needs to be, a little more accurate. He needs to lead his runners better so they can catch the ball in stride and get that yak, which is critical to Ben Johnson's offense. We need to see him not dirt balls when he's doing screen passes. We need to see him not overthrow guys. Like, we're still seeing some of the issues with Caleb Williams. I think that stuff's going to get better for Caleb because he's not an inaccurate passer. We would have seen more of that on the tape at USC. I think what we're seeing is a guy who's really trying to grasp a new offense. And for the first time, I don't know what he did in high school, but for the first time in his life, I'm guessing, really trying to operate within a system, making sure he is a quarterback that plays on time, gets the ball out and where it's supposed to go within a couple of seconds. That's the way Ben Johnson wants his offense to run most of the time. And that's what Caleb Williams is trying to do. And that's a bit of a struggle for a guy who didn't do that pretty much ever in college, because he was running around, finding open guys and chucking the ball down the field. And that worked really well at USC, but it certainly didn't work well last season in Chicago. And now he's trying to operate in this system. So in this system, when the idea is to get the ball out quickly, what are you going to do? You're going to rush through your reads sometimes. You're going to rush the pass and not necessarily set your feet and have the proper fundamentals when you throw the football. And I think that rushing the process is what's leading to a lot of inaccuracies. So as Caleb continues to get more comfortable in this offense, and the speed of the game gets more comfortable with him, and it's more natural for him to operate at that speed, I think the other parts of his game, the fundamentals, the footwork, the arm, and making sure the arm is exactly the way it needs to go, I think all that stuff is going to come together. The game will slow down for him, and we will see the accuracy improve. Caleb Williams doesn't need to be able to, to hit a can from 50 yards away off of someone's head. We don't need to see the William Tell, with a football kind of thing with Caleb Williams. We need to see more accurate than this. He can't be, by percentage, the most inaccurate passer in the NFL. That's something we can't have from Caleb Williams. But I think that stuff's going to improve, because we're seeing, like, what were my concerns about the Minnesota game? The inaccuracies, and that's still there. But seeing the field, but that's already been improved significantly. And that frantic not being comfortable in the pocket, and that's improving significantly. So when I have 3 major alarm bells going off after the Minnesota game, and 2 of them are already being largely corrected, I think that third one is going to get corrected as this offense continues to move forward. And the athleticism with Caleb Williams is fantastic. My favorite throw wasn't necessarily a completion that Caleb had. My favorite throw against Washington was the play where Caleb Williams was going to scramble. He was about to take off. He's about to cross the line of scrimmage. And all of the sudden, he sees Olamide Zaccheaus open over near the sideline, where it's like, all right, that's going to be a first down. I need to complete that pass because I'm not going to get a first down if I scramble here. There's too many defenders in front of me. So he stops. He somehow, within a yard of the line of scrimmage, has enough body control to keep his feet behind the line of scrimmage. I'm pretty sure his upper body was over the line of scrimmage because he had so much momentum going that his upper body kept going forward. He's falling forward, and then with this wild arm angle, zips the ball out to Zaccheaus. Now, again, inaccurate ball. He threw it too high. He threw a missile. How fast was that ball moving? And it was all arm. There was no body behind it. He was falling forward. He unleashed a missile. If that thing was 18 inches lower, Zaccheaus comes down with it. It's a first down. It's a highlight reel. but unfortunately, he let that thing just sail on him a little bit. If Zaccheaus didn't get a hand on that thing would have gone to the moon. That thing was about to enter orbit. I don't think gravity was pushing that thing back down. An unbelievable throw. Would have loved to have seen Zaccheaus catch that. Speaking of Zaccheaus, not a great game for him. I think we need to see Luther Burden starting to get more snaps. I know Zaccheaus is a coach's best friend. Just the way he plays is just, he'll block, he'll run good routes, he'll do all the little things. I know coaches love that, and I'm sure Ben Johnson just loves a guy like Olamide Zaccheaus. But Luther Burden is the more talented player. Luther Burden, when he's getting opportunities, is making things happen. And look, maybe there's some other things in the offense that Burden needs to pick up before he can get more snaps. Obviously, you got to trust Ben Johnson that. But I would really like to see Luther Burden get on the field more often and get more involved in the offense because he's making things happen there. And look, the offense is interesting because, like I said, Caleb Williams is on pace to throw for 4,000 yards. Rome Odunze is racking up the stats. But other than Rome Odunze, everyone seems to be getting 30 yards a game, including DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Olamide Zaccheaus, the tight ends. Like, no one else is sitting here where they're going to seemingly end up with 800-900 yards. You keep thinking DJ Moore is going to break out. I felt like DJ Moore was going to get more involved in the offense this week. It looked like it was going to happen early. Maybe that injury he sustained, we don't have a lot of information on that. Maybe that prevented him from continuing to be one of those guys in the second half. But, he went over his yardage prop. That's all that mattered for me at this point. 4-0 in my Bears yardage props, 3-0 from my article. If you want to check that out, I want to try and make some money. I believe we're 5-1 over the last 2 weeks on our Bears props. So, you want to check that out at Windy City Gridiron. But regardless, would like to see that a little bit more. Roschon Johnson even got a carry. So we're seeing so many different guys getting involved in this offense. It's really good to see. It gives Ben Johnson so much flexibility in terms of what kind of personnel he wants to use. And defenses are going to have absolutely no idea what to do with what the personnel is. The personnel is not going to dictate what they're going to do, whether they're running or passing the football, which is something the Bears have not been able to do in the past. Their personnel on the field highly told the defense if it was going to be a run or a pass. And speaking of the defense, Dennis Allen's defense continues to look better. And this was we talked about it. The fourth quarter of the Minnesota game and the Detroit game, it was 700 yards of offense and whatever it was, 73 points that they gave up in 5 quarters. An absolutely abomination of a defense. Tyreek Stevenson, a perfect passer rating against and guys he was covering through 2 games of the season. But we are seeing things get better. We are seeing Tyreek Stevenson play a lot better. That he's starting to buy into this defense, buy into this coaching staff. Maybe he's gotten humbled by this coaching staff a little bit, something that desperately needed to happen. But we're seeing a much better Tyreek Stevenson, perhaps a redemption season for Tyreek Stevenson. You saw the players, if you looked at the locker room and some of those videos on Instagram and on Twitter, celebrating specifically with Tyreek Stevenson, kind of giving him the, hey, we got our revenge from last season in this stadium. You got your revenge too. We did what we needed to do. We got the win. It felt like that was there from this Bears team for him, that they wanted to almost win this one for Tyreek Stevenson to help bury what happened last year. So when we see this defense coming together, when we see this defense, and they gave up a couple bad third down conversions, but when we see this defense really starting to play like a Dennis Allen defense, and we're seeing turnovers, and they're making big plays when they have to. The pass rush still isn't there. I don't know if we're going to get a big pass rush ever from this defense with this specific personnel. Maybe if Grady Jarrett gets back and can be a healthy version of Grady Jarrett, maybe that'll help a little bit. It'll give him one more key defender that's going to have to, the offensive line's going to have to focus on. Montez Sweat looked better. We didn't see Montez Sweat being a terror in the backfield, but he did have a key pressure on Jaden Daniels. He did have a pass deflection. He did cause the fumble on Bill Krosky-Merritt. So he is doing some things, at least in this last game. So, look, is he worth $25 million? Not the way he's playing, no, but we need to see a better version of Montez Sweat, but we're starting to see that. So hopefully that continues to get there. Dominique Robinson got his hands on a quarterback. How about that? Like when that happens, Armageddon's coming. So enjoy this Bears season before the world ends, because that's about the only way Dominique Robinson can get in the backfield. He hasn't been doing that since his first game against San Francisco in the rain how many years ago. So we're seeing this defense come together. It's not going to be great this year, but if it can be average to slightly below average, that's going to go a really long way for the Chicago Bears in terms of what they can become moving forward. So let's finish up with one more thing before we get to Matt Spiegel, and that's playoffs. It's possible, but these next few games are going to be really key for the Bears. Like, we look at this right now. Bears are 3-2. If the playoffs started today, they would not be in. I understand they had a bye, and that's part of it. But there's enough 4-2 and 5-1 teams in the NFC. The Bears would not be in the playoffs right now. They've got the Saints at home. They don't win that one. That's a bad loss. So I think we should expect the Bears can beat the Saints at home. That'll put them at 4-2. And then their next 3 games, they're all winnable. Ravens on the road. Lamar Jackson will be back. We'll see what kind of version. We don't know who the Baltimore Ravens are. That's an impossible game to predict. It really is for me. I have no idea what to expect from the Baltimore Ravens. The Bengals with Joe Flacco and not Joe Burrow. And then the Giants. You should win the Bengals game. You should win the Giants game. That's a home game. And you can win the Ravens game. But let's be conservative here. Let's say they win 2 out of those 3 games. That would put the Bears at 6-3 after beating the Saints. 6-3 with 8 to play puts the Bears in a damn good spot. 4-4, they get to 10-7. And look, 10-7, you got a good shot to make the playoffs. I don't think it's guaranteed in the NFC this year that 10-7 is going to make the playoffs. I think 9-8 definitely doesn't make the playoffs in the NFC this year. There's too many good teams. 10-7, you still might miss on the virtue of tiebreakers, but you're going to be right there in the mix. So, and I'm not trying to sit here and concoct a way for the Bears to get to 11-6. I think 10-7 is the key number if you want to get the playoffs. So obviously 7-2 would be huge, but let's take a step back here and let's say the Bears are 6-3. Then they've got that Pittsburgh game. That is going to be a tricky game there. If they can split those next couple games and be 7-4, Minnesota's the other game. Be 7-4 heading into that Eagles game, because let's be honest, in Philadelphia, that's probably a loss. That puts them at 7-5 with 5 to play. Let's say they split with the Packers. Packers are a good team. Trying to beat the Packers twice is probably going to be too much. That's 8-6. They've got to make sure they beat Cleveland at home. That puts them at 9-6. And then you've got an opportunity at San Francisco and home against Detroit. You got to beat the big boys if you want to prove you can run with the big boys. So being 9-6 with 2 games to go against San Francisco and Detroit would be a great spot for the Bears to be in. You win them both. Who knows? You could win the division. You split them 10-7. You got a good shot to get in the playoffs. And if you lose them both and you finish 9-8, well, you weren't quite ready. And we move on to 2026 with the arrow definitely pointing up. Let's get to Matt Spiegel. He joins me next. This is Bill Zimmerman, Bears Banter. We'll be right back. All right, this is going to be fun because this gentleman's joined the podcast the last few years, and I think every time he joins, the Bears are a hot mess. But for once, they are coming off an excellent win, 2 excellent wins in a row. In fact, he is Matt Spiegel. Of course, you know him from Spiegel and Holmes on The Score, and he joins me now. Matt, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Bill, I'm great, man. I feel like this is what Bears fans deserve after all the years that we've been through. And it's about Ben Johnson. It's not necessarily about Caleb Williams and what we always thought would be a quarterback being the savior. I think we have a coach who is a flat-out superstar. So that's pretty fun.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly where I was going to start. So let's start there with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. And I want to talk more specifically about Caleb Williams because there's plenty of things to be excited about with Caleb as well. But Ben Johnson, to me, like right now, it's kind of one of those things where I'm sitting here going, I may have a crush on Ben Johnson as high as one heterosexual male can have on another. Like it's really going to a place here, Matt. I mean, this is a guy, with this, he's a nerd who just wants a whiteboard. I mean, this guy is in the locker room. He is motivating the team. This team is following him. He is changing this culture It's clear what's happening these last few weeks here with the Raiders game and now this Commanders game. It's really exciting to see because you're seeing all the parts coming together. The pieces aren't fitting quite yet, but they're already getting victories, which when you look at what Detroit had to do with Dan Campbell in terms of turning around that culture and how long it took, the fact that they're getting these wins now is really exciting in terms of what is to come, not just for this year, but for years later.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. The fact that they're getting wins while they're gelling and while players are learning. I mean, Caleb was kind of a mess last night on a bunch of different specific plays. There were a lot of mistakes, but that's okay because he totally rose to the occasion. And we'll talk about him. But Ben is, look, man, my biggest question about Ben in the offseason when he took this job was, is he really a communicator and a leader the way that that coach needs to be? And is he facile enough as an offensive thinker to adjust things as opposed to just doing what he does and waiting until he has players and circumstance to fit what he does? He is a real dude, and we have seen that. Yes, he's a nerd and can say that about himself and laugh. Yes, he's odd with his little sayings, make better your best until, whatever, that whole thing. And like, there was another one last night, right? There was a new one last night in the locker room. Caleb talked about how it's like, oh, we love that. Because Caleb didn't want to, but we love this bleep, we love this crap. So it's like, he's got a real way of communicating about himself and admits when he's wrong, but he also is arrogant about himself. Caleb shared that story about him on headset going, oh man, wait till we get this one. We got to dial one up right here. This is going to be awesome. Oh yeah. So he's like, he's a genuine dude. And clearly, as an offensive mind and a strategist and a play caller, he's comfortable figuring out what his team does best and adjusting to that. I was so excited to see him off of the bye, right? And see what he had planned to do and was going to do to try and make the run game work. Because if the run game doesn't work, his offense doesn't work. And frankly, I think the NFL doesn't work if your run game doesn't work. And look what he did. Look how good that run game was with the change in personnel up front, but also the change in schematics to what he was going to use and the winnowing down. This is what he said after the game that got me so excited, and I didn't expect it. He said this was the smallest menu of plays they have had all season long. This is not a guy that expanded like, oh, here's the bye. Now let me show you my geniusness. No. All right, I think we can do this stuff well. Let's just execute and do this stuff well, and made it smaller. Man, I love that. And it totally played out that they were able to run the ball and put this game away at the end. Is just, after the way this run game looked in the first couple of weeks of the season, you would not have imagined that in their fifth game, they were able to do it like they did it last night. Super exciting. I think the coach is a superstar.
Yeah, and one more thing on the coach here, and you brought it up there about how he's willing to criticize himself. And I think that's so important, not just for the Bears, but across this league, that players see coaches holding themselves accountable. And we talked about it a lot with Matt Eberflus on this podcast. I know the Score did as well, about how he did, not just the Commanders' Hail Mary debacle, but in other instances, how he never really held himself accountable. It was always, we thought we had a good game plan. We just need to execute better, which is just pointing the fingers at players. In fact, Aaron Glenn, who had an absolutely atrocious coaching performance in Europe there on Sunday morning against the Broncos, said basically, it was right out of Matt Eberflus's playbook after that game, hey, we just need to execute better. And that's not what the Jets players need to hear at 0-5. And that's the kind of thing that the Bears locker room had to deal with. The fact that he's sitting there after the Vikings game and going, I got greedy, I wanted 5 yards, should have had Cairo kick the ball out of bounds. I'm not getting the tight ends involved enough. That's not on Caleb. I'm not dialing it up properly. Like, we constantly hear him criticizing himself and holding himself accountable for things he needs to do better. So in previous weeks, when he says this team's not practicing like a championship caliber team, and some of the other things he said, or Dennis Allen or Roshar or any of these guys have said over the last few weeks, when the coaching staff is holding themselves accountable publicly, they can hold the roster publicly accountable as well. And I think that goes a really long way in terms of building that trust and that bond.
100%. And we've known this and talked about practice, and to see it and hear it after games is another thing. What did we hear from Caleb Williams post game last night when he was asked about the DeAndre Swift 55-yard touchdown? Caleb said, "I screwed up the play call in the huddle." He's willing to say that, Bill. He's willing to say that he screwed something up. And he was asked further, he's like, "So when did you get it right?" He's like, "Well, after the snap." And he kind of rolls his eyes. Like, the team bailed him out. And he's willing to say that because, hey, man, we all screw up. And you're a 23-year-old kid who's learning how to be an NFL quarterback. This is massive. So, yes, Ben being willing to point the thumb has made players willing to point the thumb. And then you know what happens? Your own players back you up. Your own players are like, "Oh, yeah, Caleb's just like me. He messes up sometimes. That's cool. Let's help him along because the better he gets, the better we are." So, yeah, the way you are as a head coach transfers to your players. And it's the same, frankly, as the confidence. You remember, man, after the Vegas game when Caleb showed up strong at the end, Ben said, "I told Caleb, just go out there and play. You were born for this." And Caleb said after the game that Ben saying that to him gave him the confidence to then go lead his team and say, "We got this, guys." I mean, how you are as a leader transfers to your other leaders in humility and in confidence both. So we're seeing it in practice, and it's super exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And the other thing that you mentioned is that this running game looked so much better against Washington. And Washington doesn't have an elite defense, but it's certainly a functional defense. This isn't just, like a lot of people wanted to do Caleb looked great against Dallas because Russell Wilson even looked great against Dallas, like that kind of thing. The Washington defense is a functional defense. And the fact that they blocked this so much better. And I've been critical of DeAndre Swift plenty over the last season and a quarter here. But he is running really hard this season, which I think is a credit to Ben Johnson. He is slamming those holes hard. Doesn't have the best vision, but when the offensive scheme and the run blocking is opening up the holes like they did last night, even if your running back has limited vision, when he's as fast and as quick and as agile as Swift is, it's going to work out really well. And we saw that last night. And we know how important this run game is for Ben Johnson, for his whole offense to come together. And if that really starts coming together, I think kind of the clunkiness of the passing game might start getting solved as well.
I was laughing as you asked your question because I've gone on a journey with DeAndre Swift. Like, when the Bears signed him, I was telling people, no, man, this guy can actually be a bell cow at times, because I'd seen him do it somewhat in Philly, a little bit, enough for me to be happy about it. And then last year, I was super disappointed with him. And I criticized him like crazy. This year in the offseason, I got excited about him again because of the way that Ben schemes and because of the way Ben was talking about him and the way that Eric Bieniemy, the running backs coach, was talking about him. And in fact, last night, Ben said, "This is what I thought we were getting going into the season." He said that about DeAndre Swift. And then the first few games, I'm like, "Oh, man, he's still doing that thing. Oh, God." And then last night, he was awesome. He found creases. He found creases. He was very physical. He was aggressive. He ran hard between the tackles, and he was incredibly productive. This was a beautiful version of DeAndre Swift. And then you add the make a play on the outside on the touchdown that we had already talked about. But it's like, this was the version of DeAndre Swift I thought might be possible in this offense. But you mentioned the offensive line. Kevin Fishbain in The Athletic had the numbers, Bill, where of all the running backs in the NFL who ran it more than 10 times in this week 6, DeAndre Swift had the most yards before he was touched of any running back in the NFL. The offensive line did its job, and DeAndre Swift had opportunities to build up some steam and then find a crease and attack. And if you're doing that, then he can be a very effective running back, which he was last night.
Yeah, and let's talk about this offensive line and specifically at left tackle here, because, I think everyone had confidence in Darnell Wright and everyone was excited about what Tooney, Dahlman, and Jackson could be as a trio. We knew it was going to be a significant upgrade, But when Braxton Jones kind of started falling apart, and it may just be health issues, it may not even necessarily be his fault what's going on with him, and they just couldn't find it right. Trapillo wasn't switching from the right side to the left side. Well, Karana Amagaji, we know all the struggles he's had. And here comes Theo Benedict, and I know he doesn't have the length, he doesn't have the necessarily the assets, the traits that Ryan Poles and other GMs would look for at left tackle. And you know, I like to go back and watch the offensive line specifically after the game. We're recording this Tuesday morning after Monday Night Football, so I haven't had a chance to do that. But watching Theo Benedict live, it was really good what I saw him doing. Like he's not going to sit there and just overpower a guy and drive him back 8 yards and pancake him, but he was consistently getting in front of guys. He wasn't getting pushed into Caleb's lap. He wasn't getting beat on the outside. I thought it, you know, from just, you know, the casual watching the O-line while you're trying to follow the whole game, I thought Benedict looked really good. That's obviously a credit to him, but it's not just a credit to him. I think it's a credit to Roshar and Ben Johnson that they're willing to give guys like Theo Benedict a chance if they're playing hard enough and playing well enough in training camp and in preseason like he did and work his way up the depth chart. It's really exciting to see this, not because I'm sitting here thinking Theo Benedict's going to be the Bears left tackle for the next 10 years. He probably isn't going to be. But the idea that these players are getting opportunities and they're making the most of it, again, I think it goes back to culture. And I think this offensive line, I mean, we talked about all the struggles in front of Justin Fields, in front of Caleb Williams, and both those guys last year and previously held onto the ball too long, made it hard for the offensive line. But with Ben Johnson and getting this ball out quicker and what they're doing, you know, getting the run game established, this offensive line is really starting to come together where it really, like you talk about the numbers with DeAndre Swift, this is becoming a top 10 offensive line in the league.
Man, that's crazy to think about. Well, I'll tell you a couple things there. Number one, run game matters more than pass game, even for the left tackle to Ben Johnson. And, you know, Braxton Jones might be a better pass blocker, or at least can lose slower, like Theo Benedict could lose slower, you know, as a left tackle. But in the run game, Theo Benedict destroys Braxton Jones. And that's what this change was about. And that's what matters more to making the whole offense tick. That's number one. Number two is I trust Ben Johnson and Dan Rauschar, the offensive line coach, and develop offensive linemen more than I do Ryan Poles. And Ryan Poles was an offensive lineman in college, and he's supposed to be the offensive line whisperer. He was in Kansas City when they drafted Creed Humphrey, right? And they drafted is it Troy Smith, the guard?
Trey Smith,
but anyway, Trey Smith, thank you. But like, I trust Ben Johnson more than Ryan Poles, and that's okay. That's okay. That doesn't mean you got to fire Ryan Poles. It means that you let a head coach dictate the philosophy of your entire organization, because that's how the best NFL organizations work. John Lynch consults Kyle Shanahan, and he should, you know, and Ben Johnson, the fact that he looks around and he's like, Theo Benedict, I think that's my guy, not the second round pick that Ryan Poles handed him, is telling as to whose opinion matters more, and that's okay. So I'm glad that they've landed on Theo, and I don't know how long it's going to last. I'm not that concerned with it. It might last a good long while. I don't know. But I know that right now, to get good, this is what Ben Johnson and Dan Rauschar want, and more power to them. It's obviously a better choice than Braxton, who may be hampered by injury, but also just isn't the right fit for what they want to do. So look, I think Ben Johnson gave Ryan Poles the win on giving Braxton Jones a chance. He gave Ryan Poles the win on drafting Ozzie Trapillo. And now that they're in season, Ben gets to do what he wants, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, and it's so far so good. We'll see how this looks moving forward. So let's talk about Caleb Williams. Obviously, that's the guy every Bears fan wants to talk about. And look, it didn't look perfect last night. There were certainly some off-target balls. I want to talk to you about Troy Aikman's commentary as well. And I love Troy, but we'll get into that in a minute. But with Caleb Williams here, it hasn't looked perfect. But here's what's exciting. Like, it hasn't looked perfect. And I think every Bears fan will sit there and say, yeah, he's off target on some stuff. Just some of the, you know, he's pressing here or there and whatever it might be. But right now, and it's not just a 2-game sample size, 5 games, almost a third of the season, Caleb Williams is on pace for over 4,000 yards, 31 touchdown passes, not running as well, 31 passing touchdowns and 7 interceptions. An absolutely phenomenal season for a guy that we don't even think this offense has completely been cohesive with him yet, which really shows you where it could be when he starts looking a little better. I think that's a big credit to Ben Johnson. And to Caleb's credit, yes, he held onto the ball a couple times too long, got sacked a couple times, but it looks so much better than it did last season, and he's getting the ball out so much quicker. He's getting through his reads quicker. Everything with Caleb, the pace is picking up, and his play has vastly improved since last season.
Yeah, it has. I grabbed my notes from when I was watching the game last night as we talked, because I wanted to see how many times I marked little Caleb inaccurate moments, and I marked all the Aikman subtle critiques that you're talking about, and maybe they weren't so subtle. And I'll save that if you want to talk about just Aikman specifically. But here's the thing. Caleb is still inaccurate at times. Caleb is still learning. Caleb is a work in progress. But he is doing everything Ben is asking him to do and trying to do it. And you see time and time again him make decisions that are better than last year. So many decisions that are better. So few times he holds it and then tucks and runs and tries to make something of it. There's still a couple moments where you're like, ooh, boy, I wonder if he could have just delivered. But he's trying to get it done, and he's on his way. And I'm cool with where he is. This is a big ask. This is a massive ask that Ben is asking of him and that we're expecting of him. And it's maybe an ask we didn't realize we were going to need, which is him to really learn how to do this, but he's learning. The sack numbers are way, way down because the more times he just gets rid of the ball on those plays, isn't even a sack that's possible. So first of all, we're limiting the times where we're hoping that he gets rid of it instead of holds it, like Justin Fields getting sacked 9 times on Sunday morning. You know, like it's not that kind of experience even remotely right now. And I'll say this, I saw some massive improvements from Caleb on some specific plays. You know, last week, he fired the ball to DeAndre Swift on some outlets when he needed to use a little bit of touch. He used touch last night multiple times on these little dump-offs to DeAndre. So it's showing me that he is, and DeAndre even credited him on the 55-yarder for getting me the ball early and giving me a chance. Caleb is getting more controlled and more composed and more poised by the game. We are seeing it happen. So all of that stuff, and I believe the accuracy will come with that. Will come with the poise in some of those little moments. He's learning, and what he has is a real calm at the end of games, which is just special, man. And he's always had that. And it's super exciting. He's like, as a dude, he loves the end of games. He loves those moments where he gets to just ball out. And Ben knows that and lets him do that. He talks about wanting to like pressure him like crazy during the week, ride him hard. And then on Sundays, just go play. Just go play. You're good at this. And like it's a beautiful teaching mechanism that Ben is using with him. And Caleb's getting better. Caleb's getting better every week. The fact that they're winning while he's getting better is an unbelievable gift.
Yeah, no, it really is. And you talked about it, like the confidence that Ben's instilling in him, where he's like, all right, there are times where you need to play my game, and there are times where you can play your game. And what we need to do is marry the two things where, you know, they start looking together.
If I can jump in, like that confidence that he's instilling, man, that's what makes Ben a superstar. Like that's a big part of it. Like this is what Kevin O'Connell does with every quarterback that goes through there. This is what Kyle Shanahan's doing with Mac Jones. Jones right now. It's like he makes these guys confident. That's your job. So you got to break them down, but you got to build them back up, and you got to do it on the fly. That's what I think Ben is so good at.
Yeah, and we're seeing Caleb still do things like the play to Rome that obviously got called back, and I don't think it should have with the Benedict penalty, but you know that was a great play. And I'll tell you, it was an incompletion, but the throw I absolutely loved, and I don't remember the exact down and distance, but Caleb was scrambling in the backfield a little bit, decided he was going to run the football. The last second before he crosses the line of scrimmage, he sees Olamide Zaccheaus over by the sideline, decides he's going to throw the ball. He somehow keeps his feet behind the line of scrimmage. He's got so much momentum going forward that his whole body is starting to tip forward. Awkward arm angle, and he unleashes a missile. Now, again, it was too high, and Zacchaeus couldn't catch it. If it was 18 inches lower, that's a phenomenal throw and catch. And that's the kind of thing, that athleticism that he has to make these ridiculous throws. Like I said, it wasn't a completion, but we've seen Caleb complete those ridiculous throws as well. That's the kind of stuff where you sit there and just go, as Ben keeps harnessing this and Caleb keeps figuring things out, all the pieces are there for this guy to become a really special quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I remember the play you're talking about. In general, he scrambles to throw and not scramble to run.
Yeah.
And he'll run sometimes, and he's fast enough to do it. But when he buys time, he is looking to make a play down the field. And I absolutely love that, because that's sometimes when you get a defender in conflict. Look, we referenced it. And I know you mentioned wanting to talk about it. I'll tell you right now, I'm cool with Troy Aikman's critique. I want honesty. I want exactly how the veteran Hall of Fame quarterback who does this for a living feels. I don't take it as you're crapping on our player. I take it as, let's get smarter. Man, we've been through this with Trubisky and Fields and Caleb, and now we've got Ben. This is a work in progress. There's stuff to critique on Caleb every week, and Ben is critiquing it, and we should be comfortable talking about it too, while we're also praising the fact that the kid is getting better and we're winning.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go next, was Troy Aikman. And so I'm glad you brought it up a little bit. And look, there were some criticisms that were absolutely fair of Caleb Williams. And we talked about it, how he was inaccurate multiple times yesterday. They even flashed up the stat that he has the most, off-target balls in the league still by percentage at this point. So we know things need to get cleaned up. And I don't think it's just like he is an inaccurate passer. I do think, like you said, as he gets more comfortable in the offense, I think he's rushing throws. He's not setting his feet a lot of times, and that's why we're getting errant passes. So I think there are some of the criticisms were fair for Troy Aikman. And first of all, let me just say, I think Buck and Aikman is the best broadcasting duo in the league. I love them. I think they're fantastic. And I don't think Joe was hypercritical or anything like that. I do think Troy, and I know Troy hates quarterbacks that don't play on time. And Caleb's playing more and more on time, but he does have that, that aspect to him. But I just did think that Troy at times, especially in the second half, was looking for critiques to make of Caleb rather than just let them naturally come. I don't know what it was. It did feel a little over the top for me from Troy, but you think it was mostly fair?
Yeah, I thought it was fair. I thought it was fair, and I thought it was insightful. And frankly, I think that's how Ben talks to Caleb. So I think we got a window. We got a window in how difficult this job is, and how every play is worthy of critique. You want to be great? Let's talk about every little thing. And when you're great, we'll tell you you're great. But when you're not, let's talk about how you get better. I thought Troy was comfortable. And look, Troy said enough things to know what he's getting from Ben, too. Like, I mean, he said that Caleb needs to be more accurate to throw what Ben calls a runner's ball. Remember that earlier in the game on one of those crosses? That if you're not perfectly accurate on those, you're not going to get the yards after catch. We just saw it in the Detroit offense on a Jameson Williams touchdown on Monday night against Kansas City, where he gets a runner's ball and then makes the move and then breaks a tackle and scores a touchdown. But if you don't throw it perfectly, then you're not getting there. Now, we don't know exactly if Zacchaeus is stopping his routes before Caleb thinks he should, if that's on Zacchaeus or on Caleb. But I think it's probably on Caleb. My gut would be that's on Caleb every once in a while. And that's okay, man. It's a big ask. It's a hard job. And you're playing on the fly. You're not watching and learning and doing it in practice. You're playing on the fly. I was totally cool with Troy's critique. And I think Bears fans could stand to be a little less sensitive about hearing the truth about your franchise quarterback.
All right. Couple more things here with Matt Spiegel before we let him go. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, because I did think the defense, I know they gave up 24 points, but I did think the defense looked a lot better in a lot of different aspects. Still not getting a ton of pressure. They got a little pressure last night. Still not getting a ton of pressure. I think that's just going to be a chronic issue with the personnel they have up front here. But I will say, and I felt for the most part, we saw it again the same things, the positive things with Dennis Allen's defense, where they might give up some yards. It might not always look pretty, but a lot of times they're going to come through on third down and they're going to force turnovers. And I understand that turnovers aren't sustainable. You're not getting 3 turnovers a game every game moving forward this season and next season. But while the rest of the defense kind of rounds together and improves, if you can keep creating turnovers and giving the offense short fields, it's going to go a long way in terms of keeping this unit together. So just kind of some thoughts on the defense overall and how Dennis Allen's been doing through 5 games.
Well, I think Dennis Allen now with TJ Edwards back and with Kyler Gordon back was freed up to do the kind of stuff schematically he's been wanting to do. He played a lot more man with Kyler, and even though Kyler got burned on the touchdown, it was a really good ball and a really good route by Christian Moore. But he played a lot more man, and it freed him up to move Jaquan Brisker up and have him helping run defense. It freed him up to play around with Kevin Byard a little bit. And then TJ's just such a good football player, such a smart football player in the run game and more. He was still a little hampered by the hamstring, got beat in open space a little bit. But anyway, I thought Dennis Allen schemed up a lot more of the kind of game plan that he wants to do that now he's free to do, especially with Kyler back. I thought Andrew Billings was present. That was more than what we've seen. And I thought the run defense was better. And the run defense is not just the defensive line, folks. It is attacking and gang tackling. And it's those linebackers. And, Tremaine Edmonds has been pretty darn good this year. And I've been critical of him at times in the past. But I thought Tremaine Edmonds and Edwards were real good. And I was pleased with the defensive effort, and they were much more staunch up front. Bill Krosky-Merritt is good, man. He's good. He is wiggly. He is shifty, and he turned a couple of 1 or 2 yard gains into some 6, 7, and 8 yard gains. So give him credit for that. But I was pleased with the defensive effort overall. And even though Montez Sweat didn't get a sack, he was in there on some pressures. He was better. Force the fumble. He did force the fumble, and he did bat down a pass at the line of scrimmage. So I noticed Montez Sweat the most that I've noticed him in a positive way so far this year.
And I'll also give Tyreek Stevenson credit. I mean, he had a perfect passer rating against through 2 games. He has looked a lot better. A lot of people were hopeful for how he would look in Dennis Allen's scheme, and he is definitely looking better the last few weeks.
Yeah, he definitely has. And I thought there was a moment, he got burnt on the double move that ended up being the deep ball down the right side where Byard came and made the tackle. That was the one seemingly bad moment for Tyreek Stevenson. But he's been playing a lot better the last 3 weeks, and he's having a moment. He's having a maturation moment. If you've been listening to Tyreek the last 3 weeks, if you've been hearing how he talks about being coached, about going to the coaches and asking for help. Hey, I don't understand this play. Can you help me? I don't understand this coverage scheme. And Al Harris and others helping him out, man. Again, that is part of the humility that is demanded by the coach and that the coach is showing himself. So I think Tyreek's having a very good moment of maturation, and we're seeing that play into effect. We haven't even talked about Jake Moody, man. It's the Jake Moody game. What a crazy thing, isn't it?
And that was where I was going next. I was going to say, we can't not talk about Jake Moody during this interview. And look, I'm not want to sit here and debate, should it be Moody, should it be Cairo Santos? Forget all that. Let's just enjoy the moment with Jake Moody. I mean, this guy had pretty much a disastrous campaign after being a 3rd round pick in San Francisco. Bears stash him on the practice squad. And here he gets called up, hits a bunch of critical field goals. I mean, the one field goal was why you could see why the Niners, the one miss, why the Niners let him go. I mean, he basically kicked it in the backs of the offensive lineman. It was so low, but still with the game on the line, with the pressure there, the team rallied around him. He got that ball through the uprights. You saw Caleb Williams celebrating with him afterwards. That's the kind of camaraderie and everything you need in the locker room. I mean, what a great moment for Moody. It was a lot of fun and a huge win for the Bears thanks to him.
What a great moment for him. I love the idea that so many Bears fans are today getting to know Jake Moody. Like in post game, that's the first time that 99% of Bears fans ever heard his voice or watched him speak.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, he's got kind of an interesting vibe right there. He's all right. Well, let's learn about Jake Moody. His teammates just learned about him. In what other line of work do you show up, meet your teammates, and then play that critical a role and get a game ball? It's what an amazing story. And good for the long snapper and the holder and Richard Hightower for having an infrastructure where the kicker can just step in and do his thing. Very fun story that we get to celebrate today with a surprising road win and a Bears team at 3-2. And Bill, if they beat the Saints in a winnable home game next week, they could be 4-2. Just feel like a very different feeling. Very different.
Yeah, right. It's going to look amazing. So last one for you. I'm going to tap into with a baseball question here for Matt Spiegel here as we wrap up. This is going to be a 3-part question, but you can answer them all pretty quickly. What is one key thing the Cubs need to focus on this offseason? Where are the Sox on the rebuild? What do they need to focus on this offseason? And give me a team not named the Dodgers that you think can win the World Series.
The Cubs need to add a power pitcher with swing and miss stuff who can be a starter for them all year. And if he's not a starter in the postseason, can do what we've seen some of these bulk reliever weapons do in the postseason. So, and you can figure that out when you get there as bullpens change all along the way. Go get the best swing and miss power righty arm that you can get. And I think maybe it's Dylan Cease. What do the White Sox do? The White Sox have to add a couple of well-chosen veterans and further accelerate the ability for all those young pitchers to come up and have an effect. And I want to see another 15 to 20 game improvement from the White Sox next year. I mean, that's what this season has to be about. And a team other than the Dodgers, man, the Mariners, if Julio Rodriguez hits like he's been hitting, and obviously Jorge Polanco's a great story, but the Mariners have the arms. They've got the starting arms in Castillo and Logan Gilbert and Bryce Miller, and now Brian Wu is back, and they've got the closer in Munoz. If they can figure out a couple more bullpen arms to really trust along the way, this could be the Mariners' year, and I'm hoping they get there. They've never been there. That team has never been to the World Series. I'm hoping for their fan base, they at least get there, and it looks pretty good right now.
Yeah, they're looking good there in the ALCS. Go figure. It's the big dumper that gets it done and not the big unit. But that's for a different podcast. There he is, Matt Spiegel, Spiegel and Holmes. Matt, thanks for the interview. That was a great conversation. Enjoy the rest of the Bears season, and hopefully they keep chalking up W's.
Hey, Bill, pleasure as always, man. Thank you.
All right, there he is, Matt Spiegel, everybody. Always a good conversation with Matt. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. And like I said, Matt and I get to talk Bears coming off of something positive. Before we jump into the mailbag, again, want to push the merchandise from Second City Gridiron. Again, just Google Second City Gridiron merchandise. It'll be the first hit that comes up. You can get merch, whether that's T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, winter hats, ball caps, shot glasses, glasses, mugs, everything you can think of there with all your favorite, with Second City Gridiron, with Making Monsters, Mac and Reed, Bare Bones, Bear and Balance, anything with a bear name. We've probably already used it. Wrap it up. We've got all our shows on Second City Gridiron merchandise's page. Make sure you go there. And if you get, I've seen some Bears Banter merch out in the wild. Let's get some more Bears Banter merch out there. It's really great stuff. I've got stuff coming as well. I'll start wearing it on here as well. I'll honk my own merchandise. I don't mind doing it. But yeah, make sure you go get some Second City Gridiron merchandise, and let's get some merch out there in the streets. But let's get to the mailbag. We're going to start with Jared Zimmer, who's a man shy of having a fantastic name. I know you were worried about Caleb Williams after week 1. Where do you think you sit on him now? Well, I don't want to sit on Caleb Williams at all, Jared, but where do I think he is as a quarterback? I think he's doing pretty good. It's not perfect. It is not where I'd like to see it, but I'm absolutely okay with where it is right now. And that's the thing. Is Caleb Williams destined to become Patrick Mahomes? Maybe not, but he certainly has the feel, with Ben Johnson and him teamed together, certainly has the feel of being a top 10 quarterback, which is something the Bears have never had in my lifetime, unless you want to count Jim McMahon when he was healthy for a couple seasons in 85 or 86, where I think he was a borderline top 10 quarterback. I mean, look, I don't have everything in front of me, but you've got, Phil Simms was better. John Elway was better. Dan Marino was better. Joe Montana better. He was not in that like elite top 5 group, but When he was healthy, was Jim McMahon a borderline top 10 quarterback? I believe he was. But Caleb Williams, where he's headed, I don't think he's headed to being a borderline top 10 quarterback. I think he's headed to becoming a firm top 10 quarterback. The question is top 5. The question is that elite tier, the Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen tier, Joe Burrow, those 4 guys. There is not a 5th guy in that tier right now. Who is that player going to be? Who are those players that are going to become elite tier quarterbacks in the NFL? Caleb Williams could be that guy. Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Justin Herbert. These are the guys we're talking about that could become that elite tier. I don't know if Caleb Williams is ever going to get there. Ben Johnson is, if anyone can get him there, Ben Johnson can. I do believe that. So I'm happy. Again, I think he's destined to become a Hall of Fame, top 10 quarterback in NFL history. No, I'm not there yet. I haven't seen enough from Caleb Williams to think something like that is possible. But best quarterback in Bears history, consistent top 10 quarterback in the NFL year in and year out. Yes. And that is a huge, huge bonus. All right, let's get to some more of these. JT Barzak, what were your thoughts on the penalties versus the Bears on Monday night? Seemed like some very shaky calls, to be kind. I'm not one to complain about the officials because I think here's my thing about officiating. Yes, there's going to be mistakes. If you go and watch old football games, there's a lot more mistakes than there are now. And that's not to excuse these officials with instant replay and some of the stuff they have now. They can get calls right, and they need to make sure they get calls right. And I thought the officiating was poor. But I will say this. This is always my belief about officiating. Officiating will be poor from time to time, always. It's unavoidable. You cannot control the officiating. You can control how you respond to the officiating. And unless there's no time, you get a bad call with 10 seconds to go and it costs you the win, there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes that happens. And those are brutal calls. And yeah, then you get to piss and moan and scream and yell. But for the most part, how do you recover from a bad call? Do you rally and do you overcome it? Or do you sit there and say, oh, well, the ref screwed us? I hate the ref screwed us mentality. I don't like it. It bothers me. I think it shows a bad culture. I don't like it when fans do it either, to be honest. I'm not, blaming you, JT, for bringing it up, because there were certainly some issues, some bad calls that took points off the board for the Bears. And then you sit there and say, well, if the Bears had those points, then maybe it didn't come down to the way it did at the end of the game. So I get all the things. So what I love most about the poor officiating is the fact that the Bears overcame poor officiating and won the game. That's the most important thing to me. I don't like using poor officiating as a crutch. Well, the Bears could have won 3 games, but they got some bad calls. So 5-12, they would have been 8-9. Then they would have had a better record. They probably could have won a couple of the other games. Don't blame the refs. Never blame officials. I hate blaming officials because you get a bad call with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. There's enough time to overcome that call most of the time. So I didn't love the officiating. I thought it was poor. I brought it up to Matt. I thought the Theo Benedict call was bad. There were other calls that I thought were not fair, were not great calls. But at the same time, and I know the ESPN crew said the potential hold there on the Bears wasn't enough of a shirt pull to count as a hold on the Caleb Williams on the touchdown there. I don't know. Like, part of me was just like, if they called that a hold, I certainly wouldn't have complained about it. So I sit there and say, I think there were a couple bad calls on the Bears, a couple bad calls on the Commanders. I think there were more bad calls on the Bears. I didn't love the officiating, but most importantly, I love that the Chicago Bears overcame it, didn't need to use it as an excuse, and got the victory. We got another one from JT Barzak. Why not? If Austin Booker is activated this week, who do you see being likely released from the defensive line to make room? I mean, it depends on health and everything. If Grady Jarrett's not going to play for a while, they could put him on IR. I know it's a defensive end, defensive tackle kind of situation here. Dominique Robinson actually, showed up last night. So I don't have a straight answer for you. I'd have to look at snap counts and everything for the, you know what, we can look at this. Let's look at the Bears snap counts for the Bears game here really quick. And I think that'll give us a good idea of who would be the guy coming off the field for Austin Booker. You know, if I could remember names, that would help. So Jonathan Ford was a call up. He doesn't matter. That was specifically for Grady Jarrett. Dom Robb with only 19 snaps. Chris Williams and Shamar Turner playing inside. So that was for the most part, that's what we saw on the defensive side of the ball. Daniel Hardy is on the field for 72% of the special team stats. So I think Daniel Hardy stays there no matter what. Tano's another guy we could actually, so it's going to be Dom Robb or Tano. Those are probably going to be one of those two guys is the guy we're going to see end up back on the practice squad. Like, I don't think they're going to be straight released. They'll be cut and moved back to the practice squad. And that shouldn't be an issue. I don't see either of those guys getting picked up. Dolomite 79, a lot of chatter that if we won this game, we would be buyers in the trade market. And if we lost, we would stand pat. Do you think this is the case? And if so, what position would you target? Quarterback is definitely something they could target. Pass rush help is definitely something they could target. Running back support is definitely something they could target. Any three of those. If the Bears want to make a minor move to try and tweak the roster, I'm all for it. I do not want to see this team make a major move. I do not want to see this team give up major draft assets to bring in a veteran. This is not a Super Bowl contender this year. I know it's exciting. They're 3-2. They're winning football games, and they're looking good doing it, even though the play's a little ugly. So I get all that. It's all a lot of positives. But don't give up a second-round pick for somebody. Don't do it this year. It's not a good idea. Regroup. They're going to have to tweak this roster anyway heading in the next season based on some of these salaries and everything. They're up against the cap next year. They need to make sure they rework some contracts, or they're going to have to trade some people. They've got some roster things they need to do. So if you want to pick up a low-level guy, a support guy where you're just giving up a future 7 or something like that, you want to do something crazy. And I don't think the Tennessee Titans would do this. You want to trade Jeffrey Simmons? You want to trade DJ Moore? Do something crazy, asset for asset? I'd be open to something like that. But I do not think the Bears should give up high-value draft capital for someone at the trade deadline. So I did not hear anything that the Bears could have been sellers or buyers coming down to this one specific game. Because if they lost this game and then they turn around and beat, they got a couple games here before the deadline. What happens if they beat New Orleans and then beat Baltimore on the road? And even if they had lost this game, you're sitting there at 4-3, they're going to be sellers. I'm not buying that. So I don't think anything came down to this game in terms of what the Bears were going to be. I think that was probably just social media crap. But whatever the Bears decide to be at the deadline, I don't think they should be significant players one way or the other. JD Brown, at what point do we say Tyreek is having a stellar bounce back season? I believe the one play he gave up yesterday was a double move, and he's been solid in run defense too. JD, I agree with you. I talked about it with Matt Spiegel there. I think Tyreek Stevenson is playing really well. He was awful the first 2 weeks of the season. You can't say it enough. Perfect passer rating against the first 2 weeks of the season. He has been much better. We all were hopeful that in Dennis Allen using more man press, that Tyreek Stevenson was going to be better. He does certainly appear to be better. A lot of positives with Tyreek Stevenson. And here's the thing with Tyreek Stevenson. He's always shown the ability to be a playmaker, get the big pass defended, come up and make a big play and run. He's not afraid of contact. He's willing to hit people. All the things. There were plenty of positives with Tyreek Stevenson, but it was the mental lapses. It was the inconsistent play. And if Dennis Allen can get rid of all those aspects and get him playing more consistently from down to down, and then you still get those big plays from Tyreek Stevenson, then he could become a special player, JD. So we're seeing a lot of positive growth from Tyreek Stevenson through the first 5 games of the season. Let's move on to organics. You expect trade deadline activity from the Bears? Like I said, perhaps something minor. I'm not expecting anything major. And if they do something major, look, if they get someone like Jeffrey Simmons in here, it's hard to complain. I just don't think the Bears are in a position right now to make that kind of move. So you have to question it in terms of big picture and roster construction. I'm not expecting anything major at the Bears because I think Ben Johnson really knows how to assess this roster, because someone that would know, when I was excited going into week one, said, hold your breath a little bit, basically. So, and that put a damper on the season. And of course, the Bears, it wasn't that he was expecting the Bears to blow the game, but he was expecting that they weren't just going to come out of the gate and start 5-0. So I think Ben Johnson understands exactly what he has with his team and where the limitations are and what the ceiling can be. So I think Ben Johnson has major expectations, big picture, but I think he isn't going to overdo it and try and push Ryan Poles or tell Ryan Poles, yeah, go out and get this guy, whatever it might be. Because I think he's got a pretty honest assessment of where his team is at this point. And I don't think they're ready for a move like that. Chester, Poles is going to make a splash. How big is that going to be in the trade market? Again, I know we're getting close to the trade deadline. If Poles makes a splash, Montez Sweat, a second-round pick and $25 million a year, overall has not worked out, despite his half season of brilliance when he first came aboard. Chase Claypool has not worked out. That was a complete disaster. So let's keep in mind, trade deadline deals are a risk when you go out there and make a splash. I'd have big hesitations for the Bears to do it at this point. Adrian, with the Bears now at 3-2, any chance they look by adding a pass rush department? Maybe Jeffrey Simmons. I love all the trade talk, but Adrian, we've addressed it. Let's move to barely interesting. After the win last night, it felt like the O-line had just looked better with the Canadian Eagle at left tackle. I was wondering, is Benedett viewed more so as a short-term player or an actual part of their long-term future? That's a great question, and I don't think the Bears have an answer for that yet. He looked good, and like I said, I have not rewatched the tape yet, but I thought Benedett looked good. I think that's a positive. He's probably going to be left tackle the rest of this season. Does that mean he's going to be the left tackle going into the next season? No, it doesn't, because I think this coaching staff understands that Theo has limitations. But is Theo going to be a part of this team for the next few years at minimum? Yes, I do think that's the case. Either he becomes the left tackle of the future, or he replaces Joe Tooney or Jonah Jackson at guard and starts there. Or he's a versatile, can back up 4 different positions, offensive lineman who's a great OL6 to have, where maybe he starts 7-8 games a year at 2 or 3 different positions because he has the versatility to play a bunch of different positions. So I love what Theo Benedett is becoming. I think the Bears need to see more from him before they can commit to him in any significant capacity. But right now, he's gonna play left tackle. He's the best left tackle for the job, and he is doing a very good job. Bob Stay, Bill, on a scale of 1 to 100, how terrible was the night? Officiating crew, also throw in the broadcast as well. All right, excuse me here. I got to clear my throat. That's why we have a mute button, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Bob, let's talk about it. The officiating crew was bad. 1 to 100 instead of 1 to 10. 82. That's what I'll say. 82, they were bad. They made a lot of mistakes. Like I said, I don't blame the officiating crew, but I do think they could have been better. But the Bears overcame bad calls and got the victory. What I will say, Bob, is on the broadcast, I thought Troy Aikman, who I love, was too critical of Caleb Williams. I feel he had a little bit of a narrative in his mind, how he was going to talk about how Jaden Daniels is the superior quarterback to Caleb Williams. It didn't quite work out that way. Jaden Daniels made some nice plays. Jaden Daniels made some big mistakes. Caleb Williams, same thing, was inaccurate on some passes, but made some nice plays. I think Caleb Williams outplayed Jaden Daniels. If you listen to the broadcast, I don't think that's, if you didn't watch the game, if you just listened to Joe and Troy, I don't think you would have thought that Caleb Williams was the better quarterback last night. And I believe he was. And I believe most people would say that Caleb Williams outplayed Jaden Daniels. So I was a little annoyed. You heard me bring it up with Matt Spiegel. I love Troy. Matt thought the criticisms were fair. I thought they were a little too slanted. I'm not going to go crazy about it, because here's the thing. Caleb Williams continues to improve, continues to get better. We are going to hear analysts talking about how fantastic he is in the very near future and not be overly critical. I did think Troy was overly critical. I didn't have any problems with Joe. I think Joe was being overcritical or slanted in any way on the broadcast. I thought Joe did a good job. I did think Joe was a little overcritical of that. JK, even with the refs making terrible calls all night, Bears still pull it out. Huge team win. We'll wrap it up with that one. Yes, Jay, a huge team win. Another culture-defining, culture-building win, just like the Raiders game was. The Bears had to claw their way to a victory there. It was not easy. It was not smooth. It was not settled. It was anybody's ball game at the end of the fourth quarter. I made a joke with some friends. I said, Bears are going to march down, kick the field goal, and Washington's going to get the ball back with about 20 seconds to go, get the ball to midfield, and have one last play. Like, that's what it felt like it was going to come down to it again. Thank God it didn't. I didn't think if the Commanders had lined up for a Hail Mary with the game on the line, I don't think my heart could have taken it at this point. I'm getting too old for this. So thank God that didn't happen, because if it did happen again, my God, I think we'd all would have quit as Bear fans. Ben Johnson's hair probably would have just ignited on fire from fury if that had happened. So thank God it didn't. Bears get the win, a culture-defining win for the Chicago Bears and Ben Johnson. Let's wrap it up with the prediction. The New Orleans Saints, the first round mock bowl. For those of you who understand, you understand. For those of you who don't, it's really not worth knowing, but it's something about Spencer Rattler versus Caleb Williams. And when you say that out loud, you realize how asininely stupid that is. So if you don't know, you know, you don't know. And if you know, you know. So when we look at this Chicago Bears New Orleans Saints game, it's a game the Bears have to win. The Bears are favored. The Bears are at home. The Bears are the better team. The Saints are struggling. The Bears are better than this New Orleans Saints team in the coaching department, at quarterback, at all the key spots where you want to be, better offensive line. The Bears are a better football team, period. That's fantastic. The Bears will win this football game. The question is by a matter of how much. I think the Bears win this one comfortably. I'll say the Bears win this 27-17. I think for a change, the Bears are not sweating this in the fourth quarter. It's not going to feel as humming as the Dallas game did, but I do think it's going to look pretty damn good. I think Caleb's going to look good. He'll throw for 250 and a touchdown or two. I think the running game will look pretty good. I think the Bears will get up 350 to 400 yards of offense. The defense will be able to bottle up Spencer Rattler pretty well. We know Dennis Allen can really confuse young quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler should be no different in that category. Bears win this one comfortably. Like I said, I'm going 27-17. We will talk to you next week. Bear down, everybody. Adios.